and looking to head back to the Players' Championship where he made a deep run last year.
Yeah, and this red-centric or more aggressive build of Grixis Delver with things like Delver, 4 Delvers, and Monastery Swift Spears instead of Deathrite Shamans, I think will serve Ely pretty well in this matchup. One way to really battle the Infect deck is to get a faster clock.
Yep.
It'll force them to maybe try to go for... You can't give them forever to go for a kill, and red cards will force them to go for it maybe when it's not safe.
Tom is going to start by sacrificing Misty Rainforest to get a Tropical Island, now playing a Taxian Probe. Take a look at Kassis' hand. If you've never seen Kassis play, 1, he's very skilled, 2, he has beautiful cards, so you'll find a Wasteland here, a Tassiger, Force of Will, looks like a Taxian Probe, and a couple of other lands here. But he is a card collector through and through.
Oh, yes.
He loves miscut cards, foil cards, and, of course, Star City Games runs the Open Series, so we get to see a lot of cards that Star City Games has, but some of the stuff that Star City Games has, Ely has, and there are some things that Star City Games doesn't have that Ely has. So it's a lot of fun to watch him play and what he busts out when he is playing. As the boss will start off here with a Glistener Elf now.
Yeah, and it was really important that Tom had that turn 1 Infector. If his Infect creature was a Blighted Agent or an Inkmoth Nexus, though the double Wasteland in Ely's hand would have been really problematic for Tom. As it is, Ely has a lot of mana disruption in his hand, but he doesn't actually have an answer to a creature like Glistener Elf, so this could get in for a lot of Infect, especially paired with some pump spells.
Well, this is going to force a Force of Will here from Kassis. We knew he had a blue card to go with it, but by Tom casting the Glistener Elf, he's basically saying, well, you better counter this, and Tom's going to daze back. So now the Glistener Elf is in. Now the question, of course, is how fast can Tom get the job done here? Because he's got a pretty solid idea what's in Kassis' hand, though here is a Forked Bolt.
And that was an excellent top deck for Ely. That sequence initially had gone really poor for him. Not only had he gotten a 2-for-1 when the Daze traded with the Force of Will, Ely probably not wanting to Force of Will the Glistener Elf, but was forced to there. But then when Tom picks up his land, Ely's play of Wastelanding Tom also was taken off the table. So had he not drawn the Forked Bolt, his play that turn actually would have just been mana-producing land to go.
Now, Tom did draw a pretty good card for his turn, drew another copy of Glistener Elf, so he does have an Infector on the table as we head back Kassis' way. Again, we know that Kassis has multiple copies of Wasteland in hand.
Right, he would have really loved to have kept the board clean of creatures so that this Wasteland play could have worked, and Ely top decking excellently here.
Another copy of Forked Bolt will take care of another copy of Glistener Elf.
And this is where he wanted to be. He wanted to get Tom's creatures off the board and then use these multiple Wastelands to leverage a tempo advantage.
And all of a sudden, Tom's hand is quite poor. You see a copy of Pendlehaven. There's a Ponder there, a couple of fetch lands, and a copy of Inkmoth Nexus, but Tom may not want to deploy the Inkmoth Nexus just yet because he is aware of the other Wasteland that is in Kassis' hand. He'll start by sacrificing Verdant Catacombs, go down to 14, and we'll see what land the boss wants to grab here.
So the mana denial plan from Ely is not going to be backbreaking Tom because Tom's also long on lands. Both players have a lot of them. So the game's going to come down to now who can stick a threat. Trading Wastelands for mana producing lands is good when you're ahead on the board, but when neither player has anything going on, it's really just slowing down the game. It's just trading draws with your opponent.
Ponder's going to show 2 Force of Wills and a copy of Blighted Agent. Ross will consult the hand, and we'll see if he has some interest in keeping what he's found.
Well, he's very interested in the Blighted Agent, but the price of getting 2 Force of Wills here is pretty high. It's not going to be a great card right now.
Looks like he's going to keep it.
Yeah, well, I think what he can do is he can get 1 draw Force of Will this turn. And he's like, you want to draw the Force of Will in case there's any sort of discard or something. Next turn, you get to draw Blighted Agent, and as long as you crack a fetch land to cast it, you won't have to draw the second Force of Will. And I think Tom will 1 Force of Will is fine because Blighted Agent is so good. I don't think he'll want to draw the second one.
There's a Wasteland yet again. And now a Ponder here from Kassis. See Kassis sequencing his spells in a certain way there, starting with a Wasteland and then pondering. Doesn't have to worry about days or any of that stuff. Wants to make sure that Tom's board is clear, resolving this Ponder, get a good look at some cards and making a pretty informed decision.
Yeah, it's probable that what happened there was when he Wastelanded, Tom probably said float a mana, then Ely said move through combat, and now we're in a post-combat main where he's casting the Ponder. Tom may just crack the fetch land here. I'm interested to see what choice he makes. We do know that a Force of Will is on top of his deck.
Going to play the Inkmoth Nexus now. The coast is relatively clear for this card. Both of the Wastelands that Tom did see from the Gataxian Probe on the first turn of the game have been used now. Now, Kassis wants to get an idea of what Ross is working with, so he'll play a Gataxian Probe. You'll find a Pendlehaven, a Verdant Catacombs, a Blighted Agent, and a Force of Will. The one card that Kassis does not know is what's on top of Ross's deck. We all know that's a Force of Will at home.
Yeah, so right now that's just going to be a generic blue card. And I guess when Tom, the last turn by playing Inkmoth Nexus, he does have an attacker ready for this next turn if he wants to play it. Drawing another blue card to go with the Force of Will is not terrible if he has intentions of casting the Blighted Agent.
I think he's going to go down that Blighted Agent road and then have Force of Will's a little bit of protection. Because he's going to play a copy of Underground Sea. Now here's Tasigur on the cheap.
And that's what Ely was looking for here, too. We're talking about how these trades were fine, but not great, because no one really had board presence. Well, Tom got board presence in Inkmoth, but the board presence of Tasigur should be stronger. And we'll see whether or not Tom has to Force of Will here.
I think that he's probably okay with letting this resolve. I think it's relatively close.
It's interesting. So if you go back to Tom's original Ponder, where he had Force of Will, Blighted Agent. If he expected that Ely was going to wasteland that mana creature, then I think what Tom wants to do is stack it so he draws both Force of Wills and then the Blighted Agent. If his hand was 2 Force of Wills there, I think we might have seen Tom cast Force of Will on the Tasigur and then draw Blighted Agent. Because he would have had to pitch Blighted Agent for that Force, that was too high of a cost, and that's why Tasigur got to resolve.
Well, now the race is certainly on. Blighted Agent is here in combination with Inkmoth Nexus, and again, Ross does have a copy of Pendlehaven in hand to really accelerate some things, and then any pump spell will do that too. A Polluted Delta there from Kassis is the land, a very miscut one of his favorite things.
Yeah, can be a little jarring. Sometimes Ely's entire mana base, I mean, it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, but sometimes if you get enough miscut cards, if you're not used to it, I think it can be a little interesting to look at.
Surprisingly unique.
Yeah.
Tasker's heading into the red zone. Ross is going to go down to 9. I see the life totals here, 9 to 17 in favor of Kassis, but Kassis' life total doesn't matter too much. It's about how much infect he has. It looks like Ross did just draw a copy of Vines to the Vastwood.
Yeah. There is some incremental damage that's happened here, though. Tom, Gitaxian Probe, using fetch lands, at the same time also being hit by some Forked Bolts. That stacked up to 7 damage from incidental damage, so the Tasigur clock's faster than you'd normally think it to be.
Now the question is how explosive does Ross want to get here in this situation? The race currently favors Kassis. Blocking is not really a spot that Tom really wants to be in here. You know, taking a look at his mana base, one card you want to search for in this situation is a card like Caracas, and if he has it main deck or not this weekend, but he does not. He has it in his sideboard. Tom able to crop rotation for that sort of card after board. We'll start by playing the Pendlehaven, targeting the Blighted Agent, make it a little bit bigger, and now he's going to try to come across here for 3 infect.
And this is a 2-turn setup play, possibly from Tom. I guess it's actually 3 turns. He does have Vines to add 4 next turn. He would need 2 more mana sources to do it, so he would be 1 short, but does have a 3-turn clock going. One hard part for Tom is that his hand is 2 Force of Wills, and at 9, that's actually a difficult number for him to be at because it's 2 Tasigur swings is 8, so using a Force of Will is pretty high impact right now.
This is actually a pretty tough spot, as you did mention, because Lightning Bolt's going to go after Blighted Agent now. And by Force of Willing this, he does go down to 8. Tasigur hits in chunks of 4, so it goes from a 3-turn clock to a 2-turn clock. But can Tom win without that Blighted Agent?
It seems unlikely. Yeah, I was going to say, I think he has to force here. Tom agrees. He goes down to 8.
Lightning Bolt's going to get countered. Kassis is going to take 3 infect. Now he'll draw a card.
So he has Tom down to 8. Tasigur will put Tom to 4. We'll make Tasigur lethal. Tom can chump, perhaps. Well, so that can buy him another turn of attacking.
Yeah, well, he will have to chump next turn. Just has no choice.
Well, if he draws an Invigorate, he can just go for a win.
Well, I suppose we'll see what he does draw. He's going to move that Inkmoth Nexus back into the mana row here. Perhaps it's looking to defend.
Well, if Tom drew another land, he can Vines the Blighted Agent for 5, and then attack and Pendelhaven the Blighted Agent for 2 more. And that would be that would do the rest of the damage, so the chump block would be good.
That's interesting. He drew a copy of Glistener Elf.
Interesting.
So now he has to play this weird balancing act of a game now.
So what he can do, and so the line he's on right now is if he Pendelhaven's Blighted Agent, swings for 2, then next turn the swing for 5 is lethal. I think he's going to play a more conservative route.
Yeah, that's what it appears he's going to do. He's going to play a lot more conservative here just by playing Glistener Elf and passing the turn back.
Well, here's the interesting thing. The Glistener chump block is a double chump block.
Yep.
Because when it blocks Tasigur, it puts a -1/-1 counter on the Tasigur. The next attack by Tasigur will not be lethal.
This also gives him a setup that's pretty nice, too, because now he's got 2 chump blockers if necessary, be it Inkmoth Nexus or Glistener Elf. So he's actually in a pretty good spot here to slow down Tasigur. The one thing that Kassis can do right now is he can sacrifice 2 fetch lands, which he has done, go down to 15, get 2 lands out of his deck, and actually activate Tasigur. And he only has 1 card that he can return to his graveyard in Lightning Bolt. We'll see what Tasigur turns over here with the activation. Another Lightning Bolt. Oh boy, and a Brainstorm.
Well, I don't think he can give him Lightning Bolt.
I think he has to give him Brainstorm.
Yeah, I think if he gives him Lightning Bolt, that's, oh boy, then he's down to 1, which is not 0, so that's fine. But I think a plan, it makes cards like his Vines that much more difficult. Pendelhaven doesn't really pump anything out of Bolt range. Yeah, so we see there he does give him the Brainstorm.
Kassis will draw. It's never a good feeling to give someone the best card in Legacy back from a Tasigur, yet here we are with Ross having to do that. Inkmoth Nexus is going to go active. And I actually like this block quite a bit.
Yeah, well, he makes this block because this means that next turn he actually has the potential to deal 6 infect damage on the table. He has the Vines for 4, and then the 2 creatures for 1 apiece. If he had jumped with Glistener Elf, that option wouldn't have been available next turn.
Yeah, just curious if he wants to try to go for the win here or not. Part of the reason he's also blocking there with the Inkmoth Nexus, I believe, is because he doesn't want to kind of get that wastelanded. You know, if he chump blocks now and then he needs to chump block later, Kassis can draw an uncounterable way to kill Inkmoth Nexus. So there's a lot to weigh into that decision.
He drew, I believe, Misty Rainforest for the turn, so his hand is just the Vines. Does he go for a win? He has 6 more infect he has to deal. He can just try to do 3 and 3. And what patience on his side? Not to go for it, just swings for 2 infect.
Wow. This deck is all about picking your spots. As here's another Tasigur activation, Volcanic Island and Ponder.
All right, keep him those
give you the blue cards.
Well, Ely doesn't have the 5th land, so he's choosing between cantripping. Cantripping's a big cost. It means he can't use a Tasigur activation. Also, if he uses a Ponder, then Tom will just keep giving him Ponders.
This is a very interesting balance, this game. Let's see what's next here for Kassis. He's going to start by playing Monastery Swift Spear. Here's Snapcaster Mage.
Uh-oh, this looks lethal.
And now here's Lightning Bolt.
Lightning Bolt's at Tom. Tom would go to 1.
Yep.
And then the swing is lethal. And game 1 goes over to Ely.
It does. Now, what's interesting about that situation, too, is that Ely could have said, all right, I'm going to Lightning Bolt your creature. And then Tom says, okay, I'll Vines it.
Right.
And I can stay alive. But Ely decided to go upstairs, which is easily the better play in that situation because it plays around the pump spells appropriately. It's a very, very smart play there from Kassis. No surprise, given how much Legacy he plays. He does win game number 1 here over Tom Ross. Grixis Delver up a game over Infect as we take a look at the sideboards, and we will start with Ross since he'll be on the play. He's got a Grafdigger's Cage and Necropede, 2 Rest in Peace, a Sylvan Library, a Flusterstorm, a Force of Will, 2 Hydroblast, 2 Crozen Grip, 2 Swords of Plowshares, a Savannah, and a Caracas. So a bit of a white splash here for the boss this weekend. What do you like?
Yeah, well, you'd mentioned in the game before how if he had the Caracas, he could have crop rotated into it to take care of Tasigur. Now, there's actually only 1 copy of Tasigur in Ely's deck. And I would imagine if you're in Tom's spot, you should expect that. The consensus is that there's some combination of 1 to 3 Gurma, Gangler, and Tasker cards, and there's never really more than one Tasker. So it depends how free that is, Tom, because certainly there are situations where it would be very good, like that last game. Other cards that can be pretty reasonable in the matchup, having a Necropede as another Infector is pretty good at trades with Ely's early creatures and is an Infector, so that's fine. Swords to Plowshares I don't think is unreasonable against a deck that has Delver-style cards.
We will take a look at Kassis' sideboard now. Let me know what he's got over there in his unique Grixis Delver deck.
All right, well, he has 3 blasts. He has a Hydroblast and 2 Pyroblasts. He does have some more removal, though. He has a Terminate in his list. Some 2 copies of Submerge, which should be pretty helpful here. Then some things that I don't know if he'd want in this matchup. He has a Spell Pierce, a Flusterstorm, a Rakdos Charm, 2 Surgical Extractions, a Smash to Smithereens, and 2 Dread of Night. So the big winners, though, do seem to be Submerge and Terminate, ways to take care of those cheap creatures.
Well, these players will shuffle up here for game number 2. Tom Ross will be on the play, given that he did lose the first game to Kassis and his Grixis Delver deck. But in the meantime, we will talk about Season 3 here on the Open Series, where we did kick things off with a Grand Prix. We started that off in Charlotte, but now we are here in Washington, D.C. Not a lot of dates left here in season number 3. Of course, we were in Richmond a couple of weeks ago. Now we're here in D.C. where we'll crown a champion. We'll go to London next weekend. More details about that, StarCityGames.com/GP London. We've got an Open Series in Charlotte, which is modern. And then our Season 3 Invitational in New Jersey. It'll be me, you, and Patrick. We'll be crowning a Invitational champion, giving someone $10,000, their likeness on a player card, an invite to our Players Championship as well, August 28th through the 30th. And for any of those main events that you do sign up for, and really Charlotte's the last chance for you to get the Tasper playmat. That is Tasper the Golden Paw, free with entry to the main event. And if you stay tuned till after the round, we'll have what our playmat is for Season 4, one that I know you like quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Tassiper playmat. I'm a bigger fan of next series playmat, actually.
Season 4 playmat is pretty sweet. Don't want to give me spoilers because it's a little bit ridiculous, much like the Tasper one that I know a lot of people are a fan of. So keep your eyes peeled for that after round number 2 is over. But someone's got to win here between Tom Ross and Ely Kassis, and we're going to find out who that is soon enough. Those 2 players among 526 doing battle here in Washington, D.C. And we're going to crown a Legacy Champion here. And it's been a while since we've actually crowned a Legacy Champion. You know, again, Noah Walker was the last champion.
Yeah, and that was in mid-May. Have had a lot of movement in the Premier IQs, those going on, of course, every weekend when there's not a main event Legacy Open. And I think that's when you talked about how really these Grixis Delver, the metagame has shifted to this Grixis Delver and really lands-heavy metagame.
That and Miracles.
Yeah, Miracle's big. From the combo side, interesting shift. Sneak and Show has gone down in favor of Omnitel over the last few months.
Omnitel builds being mono blue. I know Chris Van Meter, a huge fan of the deck. Brad Nelson is too.
Yeah.
We have not seen as much Infect over the past handful of months.
And so we can talk more about that combo shift. I assume we will see some of that this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Rudy Brixa very big on the deck.
Deck's really good.
I mean, it has only islands and a proactive game plan. Of course it's great.
Yeah, it seems like the deck that you would be playing. Unfortunately, High Tide not very good anymore. So
I will regrettably not debate that.
Yeah. Despite your best efforts.
It's so much fun, and I still play it sometimes, but if I needed to win a trophy, I might have to play something else. But there's another I like that there's another mono blue combo deck out there. That makes me happier.
That's good. That's good, because your old favorite mono blue combo deck, not particularly well positioned right now with all these Delver decks running around.
I think it was when Miracles started to, the norm was that they were just playing Pyroblasts in the main. That's when I kind of had a throw my hands up in the air moment, where it's like, this is, my all blue spells deck really is having trouble with that.
It seems like it's a little bit difficult to overcome. You see Kassis here with the Gataxian Probe. We'll see a hand here from Ross with a Daze, a Glistener Elf, and Invigorate. A Wasteland and a Verdant Catacombs. Tropical Island and Glistener Elf on the battlefield already for the boss.
Big fan, once again, of Glistener Elves in this matchup, sneaking something on the board so that he can't mana deny Tom. Now, Tom does have to be careful. We saw multiple Forked Bolts in the main last game. I'd be interested to see how he plays this second Glistener Elf. Invigorate gives him some leeway to play around them, but it's still a dangerous spot. As is often the case with the Tom Ross deck, they're very good out of the gates. They're chock full of cheap spells, and the downside is if you ever lose your board, the decks really stop working.
There's a Pluto Delta. Kassis will sacrifice that. So down to 17. Again, his life total, for the most part, irrelevant. We have seen Ross kill some people with regular damage before. It is a best of SCG life moment of him doing that in the quarterfinals of Grand Prix New Jersey against Lam Fan. But for his deck, he's normally dealing infect damage. So life total generally doesn't matter. We'll see what Kassis wants to do here. He searched up a volcanic island. So access to blue and red mana.
Yeah, and you see sometimes they can deal regular damage. Remember, the deck is not as much about pump spells and explosiveness as much as it is about creating pressure and then just taking free hits. So maybe sometimes your free hits are some Noble Hierarchs attacking. Maybe they're just 1 damage off a Glistener Elf. But if both players just sit there with untapped lands and stare at each other, that's almost always good for the Tom Ross deck.
Now, what was interesting about that by Kassis is he just searched up a Volcanic Island and passed the turn back. Kind of playing around Stifle a little bit, and Ross has been known to play a Stifle in his deck. Now, what's interesting is that he knew that Ross had a copy of Wasteland in hand, so he just kind of played into the Wasteland a little bit. He's going to fire off a Brainstorm, will Kassis, in response to the Glistener Elf.
And I imagine if Ely lets this Glistener Elf resolve, his Volcanic Island will get Wastelanded. Tom not wanting to do that until after the Elf resolves in case a daze happens. But starting off on a pair of 1-drops and wastelanding your opponent looks to be Tom's route of attack.
Playing a pretty conventional legacy game, a little Wasteland mana disruption. Get some threats under while you're doing that. Brainstorm has appeared to resolve here for Kassis. Ross will fire off that Wasteland. There goes the Volcanic Island. Now, Kassis is certainly under the gun here. He does know that Ross has a copy of Invigorate.
And it makes sense. Ross wouldn't want to be completely open to a card like Forked Bolt.
Pluto Delta will be sacrificed here by Kassis. He'll go down to 16. We'll see if it's an Underground Sea or Volcanic Island. It appears to be a Volcanic Island. Ross looking at a Daze, an Invigorate, a Caracas, and a Verdant Catacombs in hand.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So Ely would be happy, I think, to fire off any sort of a card and trade it with the Invigorate. I don't think he'd be as happy to trade it with the Daze.
There is Cataxian Probe. You see the cards I did just rattle off: Invigorate, Daze, Caracas, and Verdant Catacombs. Kassis working with perfect information now. He'll draw a card.
And I like to draw a copy of Delver of Secrets, I believe. One thing that Ely wouldn't mind doing here is just trading a 1/1 with the Glistener Elf. But he's going to leave up the mana. I think he can, maybe he can afford to play that on 2 and just not get dazed.
Ross going to play a copy of Brainstorm. That was his draw for the turn.
Excellent draw. The Caracas not doing anything, so he has a card he wants to get rid of, and he has a fetch land. So this is going to be virtual card advantage for Tom.
We'll see if this does resolve. Ely's certainly giving this some thought. Again, Ely knows Tom's hand, but Tom does not know Ely's. So Tom has to kind of tread a little lightly here. And Ely can be the one that kind of dictates things as far as bluffing is concerned. This is a Spell Pierce.
Playing it into a known Daze.
Oh, this is going to get dazed.
I think he wants to make that play because it's not certain that he can afford to leave up mana at any point.
To me, it feels like, Ely just wants to kind of exchange spells with Tom a little bit here.
Yeah, well, if you look at the number of spells each player has resolved, Tom is up by quite a bit. And Ely needs to be tapping all his mana every turn if he wants to stop himself from falling farther behind. So yeah, is that trade a good trade for Tom? Yes, but it's still a trade. It will open up some spells down the road.
And it feels like these two players are just trying to trade cards at this point, or at least Ely's trying to engage in getting Tom to trade cards a bunch. Tom will put 2 cards back. Brainstorm's done resolving.
see fetch land in his hand there. Looks like he's picked up another copy of Invigorate and they dig through time.
Yeah. Here's an Invigorate.
And he may just go for the kill.
If the light's on, I don't see a reason not to go for it.
Force of Will is the only thing stopping you. Daze doesn't work because Tom has the land. Invigorate one, Invigorate the other. Is that going to work? Is there Force of Will?
Yeah,
there is not.
it.
Boom.
Tom Ross going to win game number 2 here over Ely Kassis. Infect and Grixis Delver going to get ready here for a third game.
And it's kind of just that spell counter again. I was talking about how Ely had to make a trade because he was falling behind on spells resolved. You think about it, Tom had things like a Daze, 2 Glistener Elves, Jatax and Purple. Tom had resolved 4 cards. Ely basically just had resolved Spell Pierce. So he was down about 4 to 2 spells, and that's fine. But when you get down 6 spells to 2, adding in those 2 Invigorates, that's when things get really dangerous.
Yeah. And that's really, that's just a demonstration of legacy there. You've got cheap spells, and then you have free spells.
Yeah, 0 is the most dangerous mana cost in Magic.
It certainly is. We have learned that over the year with Force of Will and Mental Misstep and heaven knows what else.
I mean, Ornithopter sees play.
And it's good.
And it's good. Yeah. And it's not a good, you're right. Anything that costs 0 should be on your list of potentially broken.
Well, these players are going to shuffle up here for game number 3. Now, we talked about how Tom Ross was a back-to-back invitational champion last year. That means he's got 2 tokens. Well, Ali is not back-to-back yet. I suppose he could win the Season 3 invitational. And if he does, there will be another token to join this one. This is, of course, the Ali Antrazi Angel token with his son, Aiden, and there are a bevy of ways to get it.
All right, so you can receive this limited edition invitational token. First of all, this is given out to all Open Series players this season. So you get that just for showing up to it. Also, if you show up to any weekend and play one of our premier IQs, you get one of those as well. Now, if you can't make it to one of our premier events, then any order from StarCitiesGames.com of at least $5 comes with a token as well.
And there is the Ali Antrazi Angel token. Ali actually playing Miracles this weekend. I feel like
excellent.
I feel like more of an excuse to play with this token. I think that's what's happening here. It is convenient that Miracles is actually quite good, though.
Yeah, Miracle's an excellent deck, but doesn't mean he gets to use his own token.
So Ali, I imagine we'll see on camera at some point resolving Entreat the Angels, and some of his angels with his son Aiden will be joining the battlefield. But again, that is reward for winning an invitational here on the Open Series. Antrazi starting off 1-0 this weekend with his Miracles deck. So with any luck, we'll have him under the lights, resolving Entreat the Angels. But for now, we watch Tom Ross with his Infect token from winning an invitational last year, doing battle against Ely Kassis. Kassis will be on the play here for game number 3. Play versus draw, I think, pretty big deal in this matchup. You saw Kassis just being behind that entire game, really because he was on the draw. Tom was able to just get Glistener out there.
Yeah, I mean, it gave him no leeway to play around cards like Daze and Wasteland, which is what Tom used to really press his advantage.
I don't want to say the matchup is, entirely play-draw dependent, but it certainly plays a role in things. Glistener off on the play versus Glistener off on the draw on turn 1. It's pretty night and day there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, I agree. It's not totally dependent on that. I think as you get into later turns, being on the draw can actually be helpful in the matchup because there's a lot of trading that goes on. But at the same time, I mentioned it before, both decks are decks running 4 Dazes and 4 Wastelands, so the person on the play, especially if they have a 1-drop, can really press that tempo advantage.
Well, it'll be Kassis that's on the play this go around, and he can play a tempo advantage game with his 4 Delvers and 4 Monastery Swift Spears. Now, what is notable are those Swift Spears, because typically in these Grixis Delver decks, we do see 4 main deck copies of Deathrite Shaman, where Kassis has 0 this weekend. So, when I think of Swift Spear, I really think of Blue-Red Delver last year and the beginning of this year when it had cards like Treasure Cruise and a lot of cantrips to make Swift Spear a larger threat. Kassis, of course, can't play Treasure Cruise this weekend, but he's really trying to take a more aggressive stance with this deck.
Yeah, and I think he's going on more that red-blue base that you were saying. So he doesn't have Treasure Cruise. He has 3 copies of Dig Through Time. It's more than you see out of most of the Grixis Delver decks. And yeah, they complement the 4 Swift Spears very well.
Not a ton of black cards here. He's got the Tassiger. No copies of Gurmag Angler in the main deck this weekend.
Yeah, it's actually just the Tassiger in the main deck. It's a very light black splash.
Yeah, even in the sideboard, there's not a lot going on.
Yeah.
Surgical Extraction is black technically, but...
Yeah, he has a Terminate, a Rakdos Charm, and 2 Dread of Night. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I expect this to play much more like a blue-red Delver deck.
Sure. Small splash and basically a free splash here for Kassis with his Grixis Delver deck. Both players going to take a look at their opening hand. Looks like Ross is going to send his hand back, not happy with what he saw. So we'll see if he can find a 6 that he is happy enough with. New Mulligan rule not in play yet here on the Open Series. Of course, it's being dubbed the Vancouver Mulligan rule.
Sure.
Any thoughts on that? I don't know if you've gotten to play with it yet.
So I actually did a lot of testing with some of the local players for the last Pro Tour. So we were doing plenty of limited and standard with the new Mulligan rule and loved it.
Okay.
Haven't done it in Legacy yet. I think that's one of the more. It'll be interesting to see how that affects decks. Certainly when Delver of Secrets is a really popular card.
Yep.
That said, my general impression is if you're telling me that there's a change that makes more games of Magic come down to decisions and less games of Magic come down to mulligans, I'm universally in favor of it. If it makes Delver decks stronger or weaker, that's something I think you can address later on. But I'm a pretty big fan.
Gataxian Probe here from Kassis. We'll take a look at Ross's hand. A Noble Hierarch, a Source of Plowshares, a Berserk, a Ponder, a Verdant Catacombs, and a Glistener Elf. So a pretty good mulligan there for Ross, even though it is just a one-lander.
Yep, there is a weakness to Wasteland that could happen, but he's got some insurance policy. He has that turn 1 Noble Hierarch.
Kassis will draw. Probe is done resolving.
Remember, on a mull to 6, Tom's not actually down cards in the matchup, he's just down tempo.
Land number 1 for Kassis is an Underground Sea. And it's time for a Delver of Secrets. So Kassis will have a clock on the table. And Ross will draw a card. Picked up a copy of Flusterstorm.
Interesting. So Flusterstorm from Tom.
Now the Verdant Catacombs here will certainly be interesting on what land it wants to search up, because he does have a basic forest that he can get to play around Wasteland if he'd like to. But that really kind of shuts off his hand in a weird way. Because if the Noble Hierarch gets killed, all of a sudden Tom is working with a basic forest with his hand of Flusterstorm and Source of Plowshares.
It really puts pressure on Noble Hierarch if he gets the forest here.
Well, there's Tropical Island.
Yeah. And I think I like this. So the only way this backfires is if Ely has a way to deal with both the land and the Hierarch.
Well, there is a Noble Hierarch there from Ross. And we'll see if Kassis does have a way to deal with the Hierarch and the Tropical Island in the same turn. Something like a Wasteland and a removal spell, because if that does happen, it's going to be very difficult here for Ross to win. Now, with the Delver of Secrets trigger on the stack, Kassis is going to play a Brainstorm. So he'll draw 3 cards, put 2 back, set his deck accordingly to make sure the Delver of Secrets does flip into Insectile Aberration, and keep moving along on his second turn of the game.
He wants an early damage in. Remember, Ely is aware of the Swords to Plowshares hanging out in Tom's hand. So if possible, he'd like to find something like a Spell Pierce for it, or at the very least a removal spell for Noble Hierarch, and then hope that Tom just can't cast it.
And the Tropical Island is the only one that Tom has access to right now. No other lands in his hand. It's of course unclear what's on top of his deck. But a Dig Through Time, a miscut Dig Through Time, will be flipping the Delver of Secrets here for Kassis. That dig will be his draw step. And we'll see what's next here for the Grixis Delver player, outside of attacking for 3 with that flyer, of course. There's a Swift Spear, so there will be some other attacks.
Sure, so if you can't get rid of the white source or counter a Swords to Plowshares, another way to go about it is to simply play more creatures and just accept that when one of them gets swords, do you still have something left over?
Brainstorm the draw here for Ross. A little risky to Brainstorm here. He could get himself potentially Brainstorm locked. It's certainly possible. Here's a Ponder. This is a little bit safer. Verdant Catacombs. Okay, they're all lands. Tropical Island and Savannah are the 3 cards.
Yeah, I wonder how many of them Tom is interested in here. I think it may be even now, a pretty light number of them. His deck, especially with the Noble Hierarch that appears to be living this game, does not need much resource to function off of. These are all they're all lands, but they're all just straight mana producing. He doesn't actually have say an Ink Moth or a Pendelhaven or a Caracas. So I'd be surprised if he just takes the fetch land and nothing else.
Yeah, I'm just curious how many lands he exactly would like here and how he wants to set up with this Ponder, because I would be surprised if he shuffled. and he's not going to. So he'll draw a card. It's going to be Tropical Island.
So that much speaks to Tom wanting 3 lands in play, perhaps 4, if you count Noble Hierarch.
So it does have Brainstorm in hand still, so there is some brainstorming that could be involved.
Yeah, this does mean next turn he can draw a fetch land, brainstorm, and then crack a fetch.
Yeah. Shuffle some of the garbage away. But we'll see how things go for Ross with that brainstorm a little bit later as we head back Kassis' turn.
Yeah, and remember, despite all the bells and whistles of each player casting cantrips, ponders, brainstorms, cracking fetch lands, what's really just going on here is that both players are trading cards for cards. So you need to look at their life totals and you need to look at the board. And they have a similar number of cards in hand. They each have 1 creature. Ely's a little bit ahead on life, and his creatures, they're about the same power level. This game's still pretty even right now.
It's a brainstorm for Kassis that'll trigger the prowess on the Swift Spear. So Kassis will draw 3 cards, of course have to put 2 back, and we'll see if there's a fetch line involved to make it a pretty healthy brainstorm.
Now where Ely can get an advantage is the fact that his deck runs 3 copies of Dig Through Time. And that's when it stops being about trading.
Yep. And we know he has 1 copy in his hand already.
And just as a question for Tom of how many lands does he want to have to operate, I think Ely's now facing the same decision when putting back off this brainstorm.
Well, Kassis has found 2 cards that he's happy enough to put back. There's a fetch land in Polluted Delta, so he can make it a perfect brainstorm if you'd like. Now here comes the 2/3 Swift Spear.
2/3 off the brainstorm. Looks to put Tom to 13. Tom did, remember, trade that Swords to Plowshares in his hand with the turn 1 Delver, which means in hand he does not have a way to remove Monastery Swift Spear.
I suppose he could get a little bit creative if he does have Berserk in hand. Yep, and that's actually what he's going to do. So Berserk is old and weird, as most old cards are, in which it'll double the power of the Swift Spear, but then the Swift Spear will die at the end of combat. So typically used as a trick on the offense. It can also, in a weird way, be used as a defensive trick, and that's exactly what Tom did do there. So he had to take a little bit more, but now the Swift Spear is off the table, which is important for Ross.
Yeah, I mean, he needed a kill spell there. You're right, it is an older card. I mean, green normally doesn't get to kill opponent's creatures anymore.
I say bring it back.
Green.
Bring back Berserk.
Maybe not at 1.
Yeah, probably not at 1.
It's a big number for that.
You see the life total is now 21-11 in favor of Kassis, but if you are rooting for Tom Ross, the board is clear for Ely.
Yeah, a danger for Tom there was that when he went for the Berserk, Ely could have cached some number of cantrips in his hand to make the Berserk hurt even more.
Yep.
They would have all counted double.
Ross would just to attack with the Noble Hierarch, perhaps going the regular damage route this game.
Yeah, well, he drew the Savannah that turn and now drew the fetch land.
Now, this isn't the end of the world simply because, you know, if Tom feels as though he doesn't need those lands, those are the cards he puts back immediately with the Brainstorm. So this isn't, you know, a situation where he's flooding out. He certainly chose to draw those lands off of that Ponder, but this is where we're at now since Ponder, we're all the way through it. He's drawn all 3 cards from it.
I'm interested. Tom really trying hard not to commit anything to the board. I believe may have the option to make a Glistener Elf, but he's just beating up a Noble Hierarch and developing his lands right now. It almost feels like Tom's the one digging in for the late game.
Yeah, in a weird roundabout way. I think that part of the reason that Tom is not playing Glistener Elf here is because Fork Bolt is a complete disaster if he plays it. He has no answer to it right now, though he did just draw a copy of Become Immense, which is an answer he'd rather use on offense than defense.
4th land from Ely, 4 cards in graveyard does mean, especially in conjunction with those 2 fetch lands, that he could start trying for Dig Through Times.
Here comes Noble Hierarch again. Are we getting ready for another best of SCG Live moment here?
Not only does he win with regular damage, but it's only with Noble Hierarch, dealing 1.
2 fetch lands being sacrificed. That's more regular damage. He also has another copy of Berserk in his main deck. I'm just saying. Give me an Exalted Trigger. Give me a Come Immense. Give me a Berserk.
Hard cast Invigorate.
Oh, yeah. We've seen him do it.
Remember, it's not free when you're going the regular damage route.
We're going the dig through time route now. Because he's going to delve away his entire graveyard. Ross is going to cast a Brainstorm in response. See if this resolves.
This is the spot where Ross needs to fight over it, because we talked about how this game was a lot of trading and how Tom was kind of just playing a control route. Letting Ely resolve something like Dig Through Time makes the trading game much harder.
Well, Tom's draws off of those Brainstorm. There was an Invigorate and a Vine to the Vastwood. We might be going regular.
He might. I mean, I'm wondering, is he putting back the Infector? He's just putting Glistener
Oh,
off.
yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Can he do the regular damage? I mean, all right.
Now, he did keep a Inkmoth Nexus. So he kind of had, he has an uncounterable.
All right, he has a hedge bet.
Yeah, he has a little bit of a hedge here. And now there's Flusterstorm to go after the Dig Through Time.
Because Tom has played Brainstorm, that means it will be countered unless Ely pays 3, which he can't do.
So Kassis will draw.
We'll see Tom's intentions as to whether or not he cracks this fetch land or whether he wants to draw a Glistener Elf. That's what he left as the top card. An attack of 11 open with the Become Immense and the Vines next turn.
That's a Flooded Strand. Ross?
Will he draw a Glistener
Yeah, that's
Elf?
the question. He's actually thinking about it now. Nope.
No, okay. So, all right.
I think he's going to search up the Savannah. Yeah, because he wants to have the white source of mana. Wouldn't be surprised if Tom brought in a card like Rest in Peace in this matchup, since you saw Snapcaster Mage and Tasigur game number 1. So Ely is using his graveyard. We also just saw Dig Through Time as well. So
Remember, if he casts a Rest in Peace, he'll have to use that Become Immense first.
Pendelhaven was the draw.
Yeah.
Doesn't line up great on this board with Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, I mean, well, generally, you don't care that the Noble Hierarch's a 1/1 because that's not the normal plan.
It is just an 0-1, but it is chipping away at Kassis' life total. And now the boss is going to hang back a little bit. Not going to attack. Kassis will draw.
Interested to not see an attack there. This does mean that it gives him enough mana to cast more things, I suppose.
Well, I think he's going for a kill with Inkmoth Nexus in 1 turn.
Yeah.
Because he's got Pendelhaven to pump it,
Yeah.
Invigorate to pump it, Vines to protect it, and then Become Immense for the big one
For
shot.
the 10, yeah.
Yep. Let's see what this is. Delver. Doesn't matter all that much right now.
For Ely, it's just another way he can hold up control cards and start a clock again.
Brainstorm the draw. Brainstorm is a really interesting draw in this situation because realistically, it feels like if Tom is going to go for this plan with all these post spells, it feels like he's got everything he needs in his hand.
Right. You don't want to brainstorm when you like every card in your hand, and this, if his plan is to all in, then his hand is very good. Alternatively, he could just wait and try to chip shot with and this is something we see Tom do all the time, try to chip shot with the Inkmoth Nexus, and then wait until he draws some dead cards, and then brainstorm those away and make his chip shot more effective. And I think the draw of brainstorm is going to entice Tom to do this, too.
Well, Noble Hierarch helped activate that Inkmoth Nexus. Now Inkmoth Nexus is attacking. It's gotten an Exalted Trigger on the stack.
So we'll see, yep. I was going to say, imagine we'll see him Pendelhaven first.
Okay.
And this is how we see Tom play the deck frequently. Kind of how I expected he'd go with it. These little chip shots with infectors, like this is actually 3 damage. That's a lot. That's, you know, in infect terms, that's 6 regular damage.
Yep.
If Ely lets this happen, then suddenly a card like Vines of the Vastwood just is lethal on its own. As is Invigorate.
Because he's taking a long look at his hand. Does he have any way to make a move? Is Tom sensing some real weakness here? Because one thing we've also seen when Tom plays Infect, very good at picking his spots on when to shove in with all the pump spells.
Listen, my guess is he'd be content with 3 damage here. I don't think it's unlikely he dies next turn, and 3 is such a great number to have Ely at. Yeah, looks like he'll do that and just pass.
All right. Kassis, trigger. Let's take a look for Delver. Submerge.
Oof. It's a good one.
That's pretty good. And yeah, he's happy to draw that.
Yeah, that'll help him. I mean, Tom has an answer in that Vines gives Shroud. It does mean that Tom can't use the Vines offensively.
Maybe a Swift Spear now? Forked Bolt. Okay.
And it looks like Ely actually has a lot of answers in his hand. I believe also has a copy of Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, right now Tom is unsure if he wants to play Brainstorm or not.
Yeah, well, it's difficult because I said before, I presume he likes all the cards in his hand. But the Hierarch's been pretty good for him. It's worth protecting.
He'll draw 3. Another Noble Hierarch among those cards.
So while the Brainstorm may just cycle here, you know, he's not going to get a great shot look with a fetch land, what it does do is let Tom make a more informed decision as to whether or not he wants to save his Noble Hierarch with a pump spell. For example, I'm inclined to think that he won't right now because he has another Noble Hierarch on top of his deck. So if this dies, it doesn't actually affect things. He can play another one and repeat last turn's attack.
Now, one of the cards that Tom kept in this situation was a Stifle, which is very interesting. We're also going to draw a card. Oh boy. See, we have seen him move very quickly like this before.
All right, here comes Inkmoth. For 1, maybe more.
There's Become Immense.
All right.
Yeah, he's not messing around.
That's 7.
Yep.
And if you really, you know, this Lightning Bolt, that's not going to work, I would assume.
Well, there's a Bolt.
And now this is interesting for Tom because, and he has another pump spell, yep. I said he knows about the Submerge.
Uh-huh.
So Invigorate counters the Bolt. Well, it doesn't counter it, but the creature will be too big.
It basically counters it.
The Submerge won't be enough. Ely needs another card. See, with Red Blast in his hand, they aren't really doing much here.
Not at all. Here's Submerge. Nope. Vines that. What's next?
Does he have another card?
He better have another card or he's dead.
Can he do it? We'll see.
It's a Spell Pierce.
Spell Pierce on the Vines of Vastwood.
Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff on the stack right now, so.
Now, if he hits the Vines, I think he gets everything. Because then the Submerge resolves, and then he's in the clear.
Yeah, he's actually deciding on what he wants to target. And I think it's easiest to target the Vines here in this situation, but it is an interesting decision nonetheless.
Well, I guess, yeah, does, well, none of the other ones make sense, because if the Vines then resolves, then, yeah,
Jeez.
And Tom has another Vines.
And Ely has one card left in his hand. It's a
That's-
blast,
it's
and that
a
is going to
blast.
do it. Tom Ross going to win this match here over Ely Kassis, 2-1. A little bit of a smile there from the boss as well, having it rolled up perfectly thanks to that brainstorm.
Yeah.
In fact, going to take care of Grixis Delver, and for number 18 on our Season 3 leaderboard, moving on to 2-0.
Yeah, for a sec there, I thought Ely had it. I didn't know that Tom had the second vines.
Of course, Tom had the second vines. You've watched him do
Four
this enough.
mana, 4 tricks.
Yeah.
Easy
Come on.
life.
Come on, you know he had the second vines. He
Ah.
always has the second vines. Tom Ross.